Hi there, and welcome to SOS Stories of Survivors. I'm your host, Serina Dansker, and today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome the one and only Snapple Lady. You might remember Wendy Kaufman from your 1990 commercials and ads. She was a big personality then, and she's still a big personality today. She's iconic, beautiful inside and out, and I feel so grateful to have her joining us today. Please join me in welcoming Wendy Kaufman. Hey, Wendy.
Thank you, darling. It's so nice to see you, and thank you for remembering me.
You can never be forgotten, Wendy. You are such a big part of growing up for most people that I know. So before we begin, I got to ask, what's going on in the background over there? What's going on in your life?
I decided to leave New York, and I just bought a home in Las Vegas.
Ooh.
So I apologize profusely, but every room is just a complete crap hole. So just there's just no way around it. And I didn't get my housekeeper in this morning to help me because I thought I was able to blur the background.
Well, that's all good. We don't care about the background. What we really want to hear is just about you and your journey. So why don't we start and you take us back to how did the whole Snapple thing begin? And take us back.
Okay, well, it starts off that I had kid friends, that went to school with me that happened to be the children of one of the owners of Snapple. And that's how I met Arnie Greenberg, who just ironically, coincidentally, whatever, not only was he one of the partners, but he was the one who was in charge of advertising and public relations.
Wow.
And so that's crazy in itself. His other partners were Lenny Marsh, who did sales, and the other guy was Jaime Golden, who did all of the contracts. So it's just crazy how that all worked out. But I was graduated from Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went, into the film industry, and I sort of was being dragged along by this guy, Harold Friedman. And it ended up, back in the day, 35 years, it's more than 30. I graduated college in 1980. So it's 50 something. I'm not happy about this. I never really thought of that,
Yeah, we don't have to know how many. It's a long, long time ago.
Can I tell you, it's my 50th high school reunion next year. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So it's like 40 years ago. And you know what? Women, you think that it's a problem now. Well, let me assure you, it was more of a problem then. But in any event, I couldn't move myself forward, although they promised me, and I was great in sales, and they wanted me in sales, and I just got stuck in a job. And my boss kept asking me to go shopping and to make coffee for everybody and to give everybody coffee. And I said to him, because I'm not exactly shy back in those days, and I said, I went to Syracuse, I'm here, I get paid for a sales job. And if you wanted a housekeeper, you should have advertised for a housekeeper, because I'm not your freaking housekeeper, and I'm not making coffee anymore.
Good
So
for
if you
you.
want coffee, go get it yourself or make it yourself or get somebody else to do it for you. And he fired me. And I and he fired, and my father said, well, that's a perfect reason for you to come work for me. So why don't you come to the family business? And now that you've had some experience, with this guy, although I must say, I was always kind of a worker and always kind of an entrepreneur in my life because, number one, I worked every Sunday as a kid over at the Chinese restaurant, because that's where all the Jews went anyway, Sunday night, and I was the co-check girl, and
Oh,
they always fed me, and I always knew everybody. So it was like a big social event for me. And
that's,
I was making cash, and I was getting about $150 a night back then. My mother was
that's
like,
good money.
I was making money. Then, aside from that, the woman, Serina, that introduced us, Doris Kornreich, which is a whole other story, she was in the real estate business, and it was way before computers. So I had a car. I was 16. So I would do flyers for her in people's mailboxes.
Wow.
So, that I did on Saturdays. And then, in the morning, and then I had a job also in Cedarhurst, New York, where I grew up in the Five Towns,
Right.
at the record store. So I loved working, and I knew that it was always possible to love what you did. And then I went with my family business because I had to, sort of, at that point. And I learned very quickly working in a family business is really not easy. My brother and sister, who were twins, were working there at the time also. I came in a little later, but anyhow, I went into the shipping department. He was in the steel business.
Oh,
The actual commodity was the tin plate. And it's very funny how things sort of come together. Arnie knew my father, obviously, because of me,
right.
but my product, working in my family business, was the material that you make Snapple caps out of. So,
Oh my God.
indirectly, we were all related, because when National Steel and American Steel would go on strike, which would happen, Arnie and Snapple always had a way to get caps for their bottles. So, you
Those
know,
are iconic too.
that was pretty cool that I was, the head of the, cap situation. But in any event, what happened was, and we'll get into it now, I couldn't stay in my family business because over the years, I did have a problem with drugs and alcohol and addictions, food addictions, every addiction. If I started to watch a TV show, it would be a TV addiction. Everything that I ever touched in my life became an addiction, other than exercise, you know, which
Oh
is
my,
very funny because, I actually was addicted to work in a way, like
yeah, well, you were
everything.
working a lot of jobs. You had all
You know,
these different jobs you were doing. So I can,
loved all my jobs at all the different times. And then when I finally had to leave, and we'll go back to all this, when I
yeah,
finally, left and I went to Snapple, I absolutely loved my job and got addicted, to that job, although I didn't want that job in the beginning, because I said to Arnie, the beverage business, who in the world would want to go into the beverage business, especially in those days as a female, because there were no females in the beverage business.
that's so.
So,
So you had no idea how this was going to blow up or pan out or any of that.
not even any remote even conception of what could be. And that's why we were such trailblazers, because Arnie loved me so much, like a daughter,
Yeah,
and he always knew that I was funny, that I, had my own interesting personality, that I was my own person. He was very proud of me, because by the time I went to him, I had already gone through some stuff that we'll talk about today.
yeah.
And he put a lot on me, that he believed in me more than I believed in myself. And he let me go, and he yelled at his partners that he was so sure. And we went in a direction that nobody else had ever gone in. And
So
I
he, now,
really,
he was the advertising guy,
he
right?
was the advertising guy. And we'll go back to that story, but what happened was is that I went to Arnie to learn, like in William Morris, everybody knows you start in the mail department to learn who all the people were in the company. Well, in Snapple, Arnie put me in the order department because he felt that's where everything started. So I could learn the flavors and the distributors and get to meet some of the people there. And while I was in the order department, I realized, that I was meeting everybody, that I couldn't believe some of the incidents that were happening because at that point we were pretty new and people were hijacking our trucks like crazy stuff started to happen that I had never seen in a million years. So I had my finger on the pulse that we were different than
Yes.
most brands because who hijacks trucks and trains? A train actually got held up. Yeah, I never saw anything like it.
To
And
steal samples?
this it was carrying, it was like a Snapple cargo train
Well, I
that
never
was going
even knew
across
that.
the country, and people held up the train. I mean, crazy. But
Wow.
I saw what was happening on the inside, and because I was dealing with distributors, I noticed that mail was coming in that nobody was cared about because we were growing in leaps and bounds. And I spoke to Arnie and said, wait a minute, there's something that's wrong here because I know that you have me in this side of the business, but we have to address that side of the business. And that's when everything changed and my whole life changed. But let's go back, and talk about what happened
Yes, yes. So we're gonna leave off on you're at the cutting edge on
on
um,
Snapple, but let's talk about what
let's
happened.
about the addiction and all of that.
So
Let's
I'm working now for I'm now. First of all, I graduate from college
yeah,
and I partied in college. I was
of
always a
course.
partier. I partied, in high school. We got drunk. We stole alcohol from all of our parents. And I remember going back, liking the feeling of being sort of out of my body. And I realized that going to bar mitzvahs, back in those days when I'm 13, now we're talking 55 years ago, and there was alcohol and cigarettes on all the
Oh,
tables.
right,
Nobody
right. Yeah.
cared. So it was like a buffet of
Mhm.
going to tables and smoking and doing all that stuff. And my mother was a smoker. I started smoking at 13. My mother, when she yelled at me, I looked at her kind of with disdain and said, "You are telling me not to smoke while you have 10 cigarettes coming out of every orifice in your body? Are you kidding me?"
I can totally relate.
It was a different time also. I'm like, "You're going to be the one to tell me, please." So, but I did realize at an early age, that I liked all this stuff. And what I did do is when I went to college, I knew that I was going to love cocaine. And I did have a moral and a value at that time. And I didn't want my father to pay for my drug habits. It was enough. He knew he was paying for alcohol and cigarettes,
Right.
because he really paid my way and paid my college. I didn't have to take out any loans. I'm fortunate enough about that and very grateful,
Thank God.
about that with my parents, that they didn't leave me with a big loan. But anyhow, I did not want to steal from him, and take his money for
Spread your drugs.
cocaine. So
Right.
the night that I graduated, the night literally that I got my diploma from college, I tried cocaine for the first time. And I didn't really get high, but I sort of liked the feeling, and I knew that I was going to end up to be an addict. I knew, and it took 10 years from that moment until the moment of just agony for me, where it became, impossible for me to live my life. That I was at the crossroads of whether I wanted to die or whether I wanted to go on. We all at some point come to that crossroads, and you make the decision. And that night, I got on my knees and I did ask God to either kill me that night or to help me kill myself or to make me get better. And, that's sort of what happened to me. And I know that I'm sort of all over the place.
Right.
And
So I'm going to back you up a little bit. So I'm
so
going to
please,
yeah, I want to back you up a bit. So, okay, so you liked alcohol, you were smoking cigarettes, you knew you had an addictive personality.
and I'm partying and I'm getting sicker and sicker working at a family business.
Right. So that's the other thing. So you've got now, was there a lot of trauma going on in your life? Is that something that was first and foremost that you were trying to escape from? Because look, I've gone down the path you've gone, and I've had a tough childhood and trauma, and I went through the alcohol and the cigarettes and experimenting with drugs as well. But looking back, not at the time, looking back, I realized I was trying to run from something. So I'm just curious, were you running from something, or do you think you were just trying to escape, or just curious?
I think that I understand a lot more now, and I have greater 2020 hindsight vision, of course. But there were a couple of things that were happening. I was born the first daughter of very glamorous parents. They were very country club, very into what it all looked like on the outside and not necessarily what was really going on the inside. They were country club, like I said. And I had a very young mother. She met my father at 18. He was 3 years older, so he was 21. They were engaged in a year and married, and she was a mother at 20. And I think that what happened is that it was a child having a child. And in hindsight, I did have a weight problem. I did have some issues, but when I look and I see where I was in my life and what was happening with my mother, I do realize that through my mother, I developed some sort of a body dysmorphia. And
Yep.
I saw myself as much like I was a 12 or a 14. So I was still normal,
Right, of course.
but I was made to feel like a 24.
Yeah.
And what
That was
happened?
the time. That was the era then. My mother had the same thing with me. I had to lose 2 pounds a week, or I couldn't go out on the weekends. She didn't want a heavy daughter, and I too felt like I was really, I can totally relate to that.
It was definitely something that was going on at the time,
Yeah.
and it's been going on since probably the beginning of time, with what it looks like on the outside. It was very traumatizing because my sister, who was 2 years younger than me, was a very tiny
Yeah.
blonde. And she was getting married before me, and there is nothing more horrible for many people. I frankly didn't care because I was always my own person, and I had my own life. And at that point I had started working for Snapple. I wasn't Oh, actually, no, I was still in my family business, so it was a little bit more traumatizing. My sister was getting married, and I remember my mother being on the phone with her friends saying how difficult this was for me, because I was the big daughter and my younger sister was getting married. And I remember that I was fuming, and it actually was the first time ever in my life that and I come running up the stairs and I hear her on the phone, and I'm so mad and insulted by what she's saying, and she looks at me with complete disdain, I want to say to you, and says to me, how dare you look the way that you do going to your sister's wedding. And
Oh,
I was so angry that I looked at her and told her to go fuck herself. That was the only time that I did that. And she comes barreling down the hallway,
oh my
and
God.
she tries to wash my mouth out with soap. But
Wow.
I'm bigger than her. She's taller than me, but I'm not going to let and abusive. I don't care if it's my mother, put soap down my throat when I'm being
That
in.
you that is so amazing that you were able to stand up to your mom and to do that. That's amazing, Wendy. I don't know, that takes heart and that takes soul to do that, to stand up for yourself, and the fact that it's your mother. I was scared shitless of my mother. I would never ever do that. But let's talk about that too, because what was the turning point that made you realize, you know what? I'm on the wrong friggin' path.
Well, I did understand that I had gone to school, and I felt in a lot of ways that I was smarter than my mother. I knew I was more worldly than my mother. You know what I'm saying? But you can't push people to a point where at some point it's not going to manifest in some way. And first of all, I wouldn't give you a penny for who is my brother in law even today,
Mm,
because I don't think that he's a kind, good person. Do you know what I'm saying? And
yeah,
families have issues, and I'm not going to pretend that we didn't have our dysfunction in our family like everybody else. So
right.
I'm not ashamed of this. But you know what? I was not going to be insulted
Good
one
for
more second, and I didn't care what the cost was, Serena. You have to
you. Yeah,
understand, that I was a Syracuse graduate. I knew that I could make it. I knew I was a people person. I knew I was engaging, and I had great qualities. But this is also when my dysmorphia starts to kick in now, because I'm now a 12 or a 14, and
right,
she's going on telling me what an embarrassment I am.
right.
So I'm telling her, fuck you.
Good.
But I am afraid of my mother.
Mm,
And it does ultimately affect me, because it creates a dysmorphia, and I do start eating, and I do gain weight. But I'm also between two stories, because I'm getting close to being thrown out of my family business, because and it's funny, because I even remember my mother saying, I have the only daughter who's a fat cocaine addict. I just, had to share. Like, there are things in my head that will just never go away. But the best thing that happened to me is that there was 10 years that I worked for my father, that I could take advantage, that I could be late. And I went on a 10-year tear in that time, that I just was unhappy really in my family business. I
yeah,
was unhappy in my job because I could do more than
right.
what I was doing. And I felt that I was locked up, and I wasn't with people. And I was such a people person. Um, and my friends, I would see them every weekend. And what started to be like a Friday night event then turned into a Friday and Saturday night event, which turned into a Friday to Sunday event. And then it got to a point where I was celebrating driving through, the tunnel
Yeah,
going into New Jersey, anything. I had drug dealers at that point, in New York, that did deliveries for me. So at any point, I could call them and say, bring the Coke, bring,
yeah,
I wasn't a big pot person, but I had 10 disastrous years of working at my family business, being totally unhappy. And I want to go now to my 25th birthday, where somewhere inside, Serena, we are the children of our parents. So
yeah,
that's the behavior that we learned. And my mother got married at 20. I had a baby at 20. So
right.
in the back of my mind, I always had that I wanted to be like my mother, and there were no prospects in that time.
Yeah,
I, the guys weren't interested in me, and I was so naive because my mother was so naive. She didn't teach me a lot of things about boys and girls and how it goes. So I was really stupid when it came to picking up signals, which I'm still stupid even today because I didn't grow up that way.
Right,
But
right.
wanted to be like her. And on my 25th birthday, the reality was that I missed the boat and it was over. And I remember being in a taxi in New York, and this was during the party years. This is during 21 to 31. And I'm in a taxi with a guy, and I just started crying in the taxi and saying, that was the highlight of my 25th year, that I was going somewhere in a taxi, probably to get high somewhere, and that I had missed the boat with everything, and that my life didn't turn out to be what I wanted it to. And I was very, very unhappy. And my parents were embarrassed of me, which was very heartbreaking for me. And I was an outsider at my parents' country club because I was the only child, even though I was not the fattest of the children, who was never set up on a date with any of the children of any of the other parents at the country club. And believe me, there were heavy people
Sure,
also that
sure.
were on the men's side and the women's. But there was something wrong with me. I really,
There was nothing wrong with you. It was the time, yeah. But you
but
felt,
the way I, but my perception was wrong,
yeah.
and I wasn't getting the help. I wasn't seeing I was seeing a therapist, but I was seeing an easy therapist, not really talking about the stuff that mattered. I went to an easy therapist.
So, but when did you? At what age did you hit rock bottom? Did you? Was this a
I, I, from 21 to 31, I was full
31?
steam
Yeah.
ahead. And at 31, I literally dropped to my knees. Now, let me just tell you how bad it got, because I
Yeah.
think that that's part of everybody's story. That literally, I got engaged to somebody who was just a friend. And I figured maybe if I had a kid and got married, maybe that would cure my addiction. And then I said to myself, in a moment of lucidity, what in the world are you doing? You don't even like him.
Oh my
You don't even like him, and you got engaged and you did this. And I literally broke the engagement. I was
wow.
smart enough, I returned all of the gifts. He was fuming, that I did that. And we had many mutual friends because he went to Syracuse also, is what I want to tell you. And
Mhm.
we partied together, and we had a mutual friend who lived in my building at the time. And I had gone to Boston for a weekend because I just wanted to see if I could survive one weekend without doing cocaine and smoking and drinking to come down and to
Mhm.
do pills. I didn't even know what pills I was taking, but
Oh,
I was taking, they were delivering pills to me. And Serena, I can't even tell you to this day what pills I was taking because I was one of their best customers, and I was getting, I was getting grams at a time. I was started to buy into the ounces. I mean, this is sick
this is yeah,
behavior.
yeah.
You know what I'm
It's
saying?
addiction.
And I
That's what it is. It's addiction. You don't have control. It's taking control of you. The drugs.
I was totally, and I realized I couldn't go to Boston for a week to give it up. And I went to my friend Michael's apartment, and my fiance, ex fiance, happened to come to the apartment that moment. There are no coincidences. And I was so upset that I didn't greet him in the proper way. And he must have been stoned at the time. I'm not even sure what happened, but his reaction to me for not talking to him and greeting him that way, the way that he expected, he got so angry at me and he called me every single name in the book. You fat friggin' hippo, C word. And
Oh,
it went, I stopped hearing it because I went back to my apartment that night and I believed everything that he said
oh,
to me, that I was that.
Oh,
And I remember calling up my drug dealer, getting an enormous amount of drugs delivered. And I remember going to business, to my father's business, where if I pressed, my nose was bleeding. I was so swollen in both of my cheeks that I was so damaged at that point that I could press my cheek and my nose would start bleeding,
oh,
and I had already blown out my cartilage and thought that that was the coolest thing in the world. I mean, I was really quite sick and crawling on the floor in my own vomit,
oh,
like really, really sick. And I did want to die. And I got on my knees to God that night and said, either kill me or make me a star at something.
wow.
At something, meaning anything.
Anything, right?
But God turned me off after a star, and I literally became a star.
I can't. That is like wow. I
Like
mean,
the angels were listening, but they stopped. They were like, "All right, enough. She wants to become a star." So, and out of nowhere, out of no background, no nothing other than Arnie, who is the head of entertainment over at Snapple.
right,
Seriously, he was my biggest backer, and out of nowhere ended up being in Snapple at the right place at the right time, where they discovered me doing the letters, and we got a brand new ad agency, and they asked me, they looked at me and they said, would I consider possibly being on TV? And I laughed because it was a complete joke, but it became a very, very big deal over, because I had been thrown out now of my family business, and
right.
Arnie knew, now I went to rehab.
I was just going to ask you, were you in recovery? What was going
Okay,
on?
I dropped to my knees and I pray to God to either kill me, and I go to the office the next day and there's an intervention. There's literally now an intervention. My brother and sister see that I'm a mess. My father, who's oblivious, really, he's not into any of that, but they get my mother on the phone, and my mother is loud and she's very abrasive to me anyway. And she said, it's enough already. You are a drug addict and you are going to rehab. And literally, she remembers it a different way. I'm telling you, I remember it the right way, because the fact that I had an opening from my mother to
Right.
go to rehab, I said I was going to go. She said that I was fighting with her and that she was the hero of the whole phone
Of course
call,
it was.
but she wasn't the hero because I had already surrendered. And I was relieved that she said, you must go to rehab. And I said, I will. I
Right.
will. And I succumbed immediately. And they wanted me, we called up a rehab and they wanted me in the next day, but I had an apartment and responsibilities and couldn't go the next day. And truthfully, I wanted the last week to party because I knew that was the
That
end
was
of
the
me.
end.
It was coming to an end, a fast one. And on that Friday, I went to in New Jersey to a rehab. I forget, right? It'll come back to me, but I was supposed to be there for 28 days. They kept me for 45 and called me in and said, you are not going to make it. You are going to die. And we absolutely recommend that you go to a therapeutic community. And in order to go to this place that you must go to, because it's the only place, it's for reluctant to recover addicts. And truthfully, I went through rehab thinking I would drink again because I couldn't wrap my hands around not being stoned for the rest of my life. So that was very difficult. And I was sober enough to know that that was true. And they told me that I was going to have to quit smoking. And I was a 3-pack-a-day smoker because I'm a cocaine addict now. And I made the commitment. My parents, on their anniversary when I was 31, so I'm just celebrating 36 years. They threw me in the back, Fair Oaks Hospital. They threw me in the back of their car and said there were other things that they would rather be doing on their anniversary than taking me to my therapeutic community in New Jersey. But the doors closed behind me. And, there I was. And I literally was in rehab from 28 days. It went to 10 months that I was gone, that
Wow.
I had to get better. And I never even made it through the program, got kicked out of my therapeutic community
Why?
because they caught me gambling on the Kentucky Derby.
Only you, Wendy. Only you. Oh my God. Oh my God. And they banned you for gambling. All the
They,
other good stuff you gave up, but the
they
gambling is what got you.
it was a connection with friends that I knew. And the friend that I wrote to literally called up my mother and said, she's asking me to gamble out of rehab. And I wonder if she's going to ask me to send her a package of cocaine next. And my mother called the place
Oh,
and they threw me out. But they followed me and they watched me and they had me come back. And I didn't want to work for Arnie, and I was just coming out and
right.
I went back to my apartment and I was terrified. I gained 100 pounds. I left rehab like at 155 pounds. I felt great about myself. And in 1 year, gained 100 pounds and, went to, up and down and up and down and up and down and went to work for Arnie after I turned him down 2 times, but I was running out of money at that point. And then I said, I have to come work for you because I'm running out of money. Not that I want to, because now I can't insult you as my parent, as my friend's parent, who I love very much.
Right.
And he just said, "Come, it'll be a whole new start." And he told his partners all about me. There were never any secrets, and it was a miracle. And God, Serena, that let me be on TV in a year and a half. In a half a year, I was doing the letters, and in a half a year, they wanted me in the commercials,
That
and
is
they got behind me.
that is crazy. So now let's go back because we had left off when you had found the mailroom and you had seen all these letters, and you were working and you knew it was the edge of something great that was about to happen. And so, whose idea was it for you to read the letters on TV, and how did that all take place?
So what happened is Snapple was a private company, and when I got in, they were looking to sell it.
Okay,
So Merrill Lynch was very involved in the sale, which became to Quaker Oats.
right,
Okay, so I ended up working for a year for Arnie and the boys, and then I was taken like in the second year by the Quaker Oats acquisition. And part of the deal was that one of the people from Merrill that made this thing happen, her husband was a creator, a copywriter, I'm sorry, over at Ogilvy and Mather. And part of the deal is that he was coming to Snapple and he was going to be the head of marketing because we didn't have a head of marketing. I in that time frame that I was there and he was not, Jude Hammerly was his name, I made myself the head of public relations because I could publicly relate and took the letters. And Arnie sent me to school to learn how to do the letters because we didn't know how to do computers because I just missed it in my age group. We missed that in college. What we had was the beginning of Dragons and Dungeons that was coming in from these huge mainframes from IBM that took up an entire room, and you did it with cards.
I remember all those little cards.
Those cards.
The punch cards.
And I didn't have time for that bullshit to do those cards. So I was paying people to do those cards for me in sociology back in school. So it was really sort of a crazy, heady time. But the new people came in, and we had already started those commercials. And they inherited me, and there was just so you know, Jude came in, and took over the job as marketing, and part of his charge was to find a new agency, and that's where they found me, and that's where they met me. And he said, you got to meet this girl because she's doing the letters, and she has this entire gig going with all of our consumers, and she's hilarious, and she's irrepressible, and she's not a people pleaser. She gives it to them when they get on her last nerve. And one of my famous stories, which was great, was somebody had written and said to Jude, wrote to Snapple and said, how, this is when I was already now doing the commercials, because Arnie let me just take a step. Arnie went to his partners, and his partners are like, how are you going to put the fat girl from the order department on television? And Arnie said, the advertising agency wants her. So why are we paying them to give us what to do and tell us what to do and not listen to them? And if they want her, that's my job. I want her because they're telling us. So now he gets behind me, and they tell me I meet everybody in the ad agency. They film me. Jude hears me, and the ad agency hears me. Somebody writes, that was a little bit later. So I'll go back to that. But everybody says it's Wendy. She's going to go on TV. And Arnie sits me down and says, this is all now on you. You did this. I did not do this. You created this niche of people. They love you. And these were three guys, that were in people. People. They just... So I was organizing their interviews, and I was like the woman who, like I was the wife to these three guys, that I'm running the show. Now they are running the business. I don't want to run, but
you were behind the scenes. You were the social director.
I was the social director. They gave me $20,000 immediately in raises. And Arnie says they want you, and I'm going to give you to them unless you feel that you can't do this because you're coming right out of rehab. Like, we're going to put a budget together and put you on TV. So I can't even believe it because I'm remembering my prayer to make me a star, and I'm on the cusp of really being a star, but not understanding the magnitude of what's going to happen.
Yeah, of what you actually manifest. That's incredible. So tell me about this person who wrote in.
So now I just got to tell you a really funny story. So now I find out I'm going to be the star of the Snapple campaign. So I call up my parents to tell them that I will now be the star of the new Snapple campaign. And my mother screams, Ronnie, which is my father, Ronnie, get on the phone. Hurry up, get on the phone. And my father gets on the phone, and my mother screams, Ronnie, she's calling to say that she's going to be the star of the Snapple campaign. She's back on drugs again. Ronnie, there's something. She's like, you're not an actress. You're a fat person from Long Island.
Oh my God. You can't make this shit up. You really
It just,
can't.
I was so excited, and it was such a buzzkill, but it was sort of funny at that time because I had grown into my own. So
Good.
now I'm on TV, and they are loving me because this guy writes to the office and says, "Why would you let that fat cow be on TV?" Which presses every single button for
Yeah.
me that
Yeah.
you can imagine.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I say, you know what? I am not finished with him. And I find this guy and I call him up and I get him on the phone and I'm like, "Hi, Greg, how are you?" And he's like, "Who is this?" I'm like, "You don't know who this is?" He's like, "No, I don't know who this is." I'm like, "It's the fat cow over at Snapple." And it just goes dead. Like he can't even believe it. I said, "I'm only calling because I find that it's really, really unfair that you know what I look like and I don't have a picture of you. So I would like for you to send me a picture of you, and then I would like to have a follow-up conversation because I'm sure you're not so terrific yourself. And if you don't want to buy Snapple, don't buy it because we don't even want your type as a fan because we believe, in
Yeah.
people and all their
Exactly.
foibles and faults,
Oh
and
my
we have to
God.
everybody."
I love you, Wendy. I do. I love you so much. You're a fucking badass.
And that's what they loved about me is that I always was badass in my way. And I just remember in the third year, Arnie had to leave, and of course we got sold again. Yeah, I was like a corporate survivor. I went through three managements during my day, or four managements. It, no, I think four, because Dr. Pepper, Texas was the last stop for me. And that's when the commercials started, to go by the wayside. New people wanted to do it. So
Right.
I had 3 years, but they had a big problem with me because now my kids were growing up and
Yeah.
they were becoming the people who were the producers at VH1
Yeah.
and MTV. And I ended up on Celebrity Fit Club, and I ended up doing I Love the 90s. So it wasn't easy. They kept me through 2008.
Wow.
They
That's
had to keep
incredible.
me, and then they just sort of faded me away.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk about that. So you've had such a run. It was such a high. You've been through, I mean, an incredible journey, and you're sober, and now it comes to an end. So how did you reinvent yourself? What did you do?
Well, if anybody remembers, Snapple was made from the best stuff on earth. And I was terrified to go to AA meetings because people are very sick in some of those rooms,
Mm.
and I didn't want, the spokesperson from this beverage company to be on the outside. So, like going to meetings. So I hired somebody with 30 years of sobriety to be my therapist. So
Wow.
she became more of a sponsor and whatever. And we worked very hard together because it was very, very difficult because I became the Snapple Lady
Yeah.
to a company that didn't want to have anything to do with me. I'm peace, love, and tie dye, and I would have done it much different in a very nice way because I don't want to burn bridges or anything. But I really had to work therapeutically on understanding where I thought that the Snapple Lady was gigantic, that Wendy Kaufman was much more gigantic, and the Snapple Lady was just a small piece of me.
Yes.
So
Yes.
so coming to the realization and embracing the realization that I was bigger and better
Yeah.
than both. Do you know what?
I
and
do.
and
That is so such a key thing in your life to realize that you are more than what everybody else sees. That you're a bigger. you're bigger, and your heart and your just who you are is much bigger than anyone could have ever even fathomed, especially yourself.
Life happens, as you know better than anybody.
Yeah,
Life happened to me in a very, very strange way. And I never had children, but I certainly have had tremendous losses in my life.
I
You
know.
know, a part of me, got lost along the way, a part of me as a child, so I spent 36 years, mourning, and being, in touch with all of the feelings. And, I know who I am, and I know, when to pull back, and I do it one day at a time, and I'm there for people. And, we do the best that we can, but I know that I do believe in God,
Yeah.
and I have tremendous faith, and I believe that everything happens to us for a reason that may not be known at that time, but we will know. And I sort of do know.
It is a journey, but like if you knew or saw someone suffering today in the way that you suffered at 25 years old, what would or even let me make it more personal. Let's go back to your 25-year-old girl that was in that taxi. What would you say to her or whisper in her ear today if you could tell her something back then?
The first thing that I would say is look up dysmorphia immediately. Look it up. Just look it up.
Oh my gosh.
Then, second, I would say believe in yourself, because it's all going to work out in a way that will you will never even believe what happens.
My gosh. I think that's great advice. I really do.
You know what? You can turn the corner, and run into somebody that will change your whole entire life. I mean, honestly, I didn't realize, that when I met my best friend Michael Greenberg, Arnie's son, that would end up being a career life changing event from the beverage business into entertainment. Like I couldn't have manipulated that scenario. I wouldn't have even thought of it. I was so stoned. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, well, of course, but yeah, but you did manifest it. You wanted to be a star.
Well, it came easy to me because I was just being who I was,
Yes.
so they were borrowing my personality to stick me to their brand. So, in a way, I do have the last laugh because I am the beginning of reality television.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. Yes.
I am the beginning of the whole thing of reality TV. Now, nobody puts two and two together, but I'm the first branded real person who went out there and
Exactly.
became a great success.
You are, and more than that, you were a source of encouragement. You were put up at a time where we as women needed to see someone real, someone true, someone who wasn't afraid to speak their mind and to talk to us. And you were real. You weren't a Barbie doll. You were Wendy. And it's iconic, but it's also your heart showed through in everything you did back then, and just who you are.
Well, what was so interesting is that I knew that the only way to stay sober in my particular journey was to get out of my own head, which
Mm,
is something that all of us at some point have to realize that is the worst place for me to be. I do not coexist with myself well when I get in there and I start worrying, and thinking too deep. So
yeah.
I knew that the whole trick was getting out and doing kindnesses for other people. So, in a way, this was a God hit
Yeah.
because I got to do wonderful things for thousands, if not millions of people across the United States. I could be out of my own head and I made people well. I was them. I was their ilk. When Kurt Cobain, who you might remember, and some of your people, he was the lead singer, married to Courtney Love,
Yep.
and he committed suicide also. And
Yeah.
I got so many letters, Serina, from kids that didn't know who to talk to, that
Yeah.
wanted to ask me and share with me their feelings about Kurt Cobain and what he had done by doing it to themselves, to himself, but the people around him. And I was going to my therapist also at the time, who was my AA counselor, and I said, I can't let these kids down. Every one of them has to have an answer. And I remember psychologically writing them all back and saying, because it was my respect. If you're gonna write to somebody, what was I gonna ignore their letter over my dead body?
Yeah.
That's not who I am. That's not what I. But it's a grace. It's a grace of God to be able to do that. And I knew that these kids were suffering. Some of us don't know how much they're suffering. Do you know what I'm saying? And we have to
Wow.
live, but there are many, many manifestations, Serena, that come back, that we get millions of gifts.
Yeah.
Not, we don't get our children, we don't get some of our friends and family who we've lost, but we get millions and millions of signs. And
I said it too, exactly. Oh, Wendy. Oh my gosh. So we've been on such a journey with you, but what's lighting you up right now? What makes you glow? Because you still glow. You still got all that charisma and everything. What's lighting you up your world right now?
well, it's very, very funny because I did in the end have a great relationship with my mother, because when she got older, she gained 100 pounds. I had an unbelievable karma experience where she was a size bigger than me.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And I remember her saying to me, that she was afraid when she died, if she died then, nobody would recognize her.
Oh
So,
my
so funny stories like that. But what lights me up now is that I don't have all this garbage in my head, and I weigh 150 pounds now.
Woo! Good for you.
A size 10 and a 12, because I don't have to eat
Yeah.
my sadnesses away, because you know what, I'm content in
Mm.
who I am. I work all the time on what I can do better. Yom Kippur is an easy holiday for me because I know so much what I have to work on and what I have to get better, and being introspective,
Oh,
and I know who I am.
that's
And
so.
what makes me happy is that I'm fitting in my skin perfectly now,
Oh,
and that makes me feel good. Plus, I can see as many concerts as I want to before all my people die,
oh,
because we're of that age now that everybody's getting sick from the music that I grew up with. And you remember I did say I worked in a record store, and
yes.
that was my first love and passion, was music. And that's what I love most, and theater and entertainment. And I get it all in Las Vegas, and just didn't want to be in New York anymore.
I totally get that, and I'm so happy for you. It warms my heart and my soul, and I do want to. I have to. I got to ask you one last question before I usually close every show with a poem about from my son, but um, I just want to ask you, what is giving you hope right now? in your life? What's giving you hope?
I hope that I would do another Snapple commercial to bring people together, because this world, I hope for a lot of things. I just am very worried, about what's happening
Everything.
now,
Yeah.
but I have hope, that somebody will, the world is just so different now. And I just hope that even though people think differently, that they would just open their ears long enough to listen to why people choose the side that they're on, not because they don't know, it's because for a reason it fits a certain narrative that's important to that person. So we got to just stop.
I know.
And
And
that's
maybe
my
spread some
hope.
kindness, right? A
Just
little bit of kindness.
kindness. But it seems that it's evaded because it's what you're affiliated with first. Do
Well,
you know
and
what I'm
it's
saying?
so funny because, the poem I'm going to read from Scott, it's called Everybody is Different. And it bleeds right into
It's
it.
perfect.
It says, no one is the same. Then why do I treat people so blame? I don't take the time to listen to them complain. I just pretend I understand their pain. I don't talk. I just take charge. Assume no place for them to walk. I thought I treated everyone differently, especially those who I loved. But I rise no one above. I keep those I know behind a gate. The gate I can't escape. The gate I can't shake. The gate that can't let me be my own shape. I ask myself, when was the last time you were true and didn't move so fast? I tell myself, slow down, keep your head down. I cover myself in confidence so others won't see the true me. I shower myself in all these pickup lines and lies. I don't even know if the real me is still alive. This was written by my 15-year-old son. I mean,
It's very, very deep stuff. And he clearly was very, very in touch with the facade and what we started with, what we are on the outside and what we really are on the inside, unfortunately.
oh, Wendy, I got to tell you, your honesty, your heart, who you are has been just so amazing. And I'm so grateful that you shared that with me and my listeners today. I can't thank you enough for being here. I'm so blessed to have you as a friend and to call you my friend. And I just want to say thank you. And if people want to reach out to the Snapple Lady, is there any way they can do that?
You know what? My email address is askwendy@aol.com. And I'm not changing it because I am an old dinosaur and I am that woman. Askwendy@aol.com.
Oh my God, I love you. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today. SOS Stories of Survivors, where survival sparks the soul. Thank you so much.